How's everybody doing today? I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you. And Valerie's getting ready to go there, the clicker. Like Carrie said, definitely the most dangerous part of any flight is actually the drive to the airport. The rare exceptions are the ones I'll be talking to today, and it'll just be general aviation accidents and incidents I'll be speaking about. But kind of give an overview. Not a lot of people know that much about the National Transportation Safety Board. If anybody knows anything, it's that little black box that you hear about on CNN or Fox News or whichever news reference you prefer there. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide there, Valerie. And I work out of the Office of Aviation Safety. We're split out into 5 different offices. There's a marine office, a highway office, railways and pipeline offices, and then also the Office of Research and Engineering. They're the really smart folks that dig into the black boxes that can get any kind of data, even if it's partly burnt or anything like that. They're able to really get some good stuff there. I work along, looks like the... Yeah, just go back one there. So I work in operational factors. I work quite a bit with air traffic controllers in my division, as well as operation folks, and those are former pilots of planes as big as 777s or 757s, and they deal with the cockpit and what goes on in there. But we have quite a few offices, so anything from an engine to a flap to batteries to exactly what the pilot was doing that day and dealing with the fatigue issues or anything like that. We're looking into those accidents and incidents in every case there. So step to the next slide there. And so, 2 more clicks, sorry. We have as far as meteorologists, we're on duty 24/7. There's 3 of us there you saw, so somebody's always on call. I'm not this week, fortunately, but we deal with any fatal and sometimes non-fatal accidents, anything from commercial down to little Piper or any helicopter accidents that you see going on around the country. If it's an incident, that's typically what we deal with there is turbulence as it relates to a commercial jetliner. The cabin crew or the flight attendant was not sitting down when they went through a little bump or something like that. And so we get an email or a fax or a text from the FAA, or we are watching the news. We have I have a information desk that looks into all that. So you can step to the next slide there. And so within any time there's an accident incident, we look at the weather, and within about 10 minutes to 30 minutes or so, most of the time we are fully spun up on the weather, exactly what's going on. We look at weather charts, we look at weather radar data, satellite data from a meteorologist perspective, and then from there, next click, and we go to talk to our supervisor. This case looks like, they were talking to air traffic control, and the air traffic said, when the pilot was talking to air traffic, they said, yeah, I'm having some engine issues. So in that particular case, meteorology-wise, we'll probably just need to get the closest surface observation there, and that's all the support that they'll need. But if somebody was having some type of accident or incident in a thunderstorm, then in that case, we might want to investigate a little bit deeper. So we'll call and coordinate with my supervisor, and then in every accident case, there's an investigator in charge. And what that investigator in charge does is they organize every single of those little pie chart that you saw there. They organize every single one of those people. So they'll have an air traffic person, myself, an operations person, a battery or flap person, and so on. And so we coordinate with them as far as what we're doing. So next slide there, Valerie. And I think 2 more clicks here. Yeah. So when we call and coordinate, we also call and coordinate with other people within our agency. So a lot of times will call and coordinate with my air traffic control folks there. They're able to pick up the latitude and longitude data as far as timing with any plane flying around the country within about 10 to 30 minutes or so. They're getting the really good data from those radars. If you're looking at an airport or something like that, they're getting the good data from there. And then I call and coordinate with the forensic manager at the National Weather Service office in Sterling, Maryland, Sterling, Virginia, and then there's also an office up in College Park. And so we call and coordinate with them if we need to go to a particular facility. They're split up into different regions. We need to make sure and we're talking to the right folks there. So you can go on to the next slide. So here's an example of an accident scene. This one's in Wyoming case. It was a small general aviation accident that crashed in some weather. On an accident scene, the investigator in charge will get there right away and start coordinating with the FAA. From a meteorologist perspective, I'll probably go to the accident scene for maybe 3 hours to up to a half a day to coordinate with folks and make sure that we're getting all the data that we need. And then from there, I'll split off and go to the National Weather Service office, or a lot of times we'll go to the air traffic control facility and see what weather information there able to pull from that. So next slide. So, and click one more time. So this is the on-scene portion from a meteorologist perspective. What we want to be able to do is gather all the factual data, especially the things that are perishable. In an air traffic control case, or dealing with air traffic control, they record pretty much everything at an air traffic control facility. If it's on, they're talking with a pilot, if they're making a call to Papa John's to order pizza, that is all on tape. And we're able to pull those tapes, but they write over the data every 24 hours. So we need, since it's so data intensive and they're pulling all the graphics and all the voice commands there, they wipe those tapes every 24 hours. So we need to call and make sure that we save the right amount of data and get there right away. So when I'm on call, I have to be able to be at RDU within 2 hours, so I can't really go too far in those cases. And then from there, we provide an out brief to the facility. Again, from the NTSB's perspective, we're not there for legal reasons. We're not there to provide any judicial warning or criteria or anything like that. We're strictly there to get the facts, and then we provide the probable cause of the accident in there. So the NTSB is, we're not under any other agency. We're completely under the Congress, so we're not part of DOT or any other agency, so we're completely independent there. So a lot of times we'll issue recommendations when it comes to these cases there. So next slide. So from when we're gathering weather data, here's just a 3D view of the weather radar in one of the cases there. We're gathering all the products, so whether it's text, whether it's visual, we have our own weather computer model. We're able to simulate weather anywhere in the world. So if it's an American part or an American plane that crashes in Australia, we're able to get data or run data for that we need to. And then we stay up on top of all the new technology that's coming out. So we'll make trips at least once a year to FAA facilities in New Jersey and up in DC area to stay on top of what they're working there. So next slide. Here is the NTSB website, the front page there. At the end of my talk, it'll have the hyperlink there. You can do one more click. Right in the center there is the accident database. So one more click, Valerie. And that'll bring up this page over there on the left, and that will you can search any date in there that you want if you have any questions about any particular accident that you're interested or incident, and pull down the beginning and end dates. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those as well. But this is where you'll find the probable cause and all the factual data. So you'll see my meteorology report, you'll see the air traffic control report, and you'll see the final report that takes components of each one of those reports in there as well. So the second part of my talk, that's kind of an overview of the NTSB in a nutshell with as it pertains to meteorology. I wish I had bought a black box for you folks to see out there. I'll wheel that in sometime or send a picture. But from the meteorology side, when we're dealing with aviation accidents, typically 99.9% of accidents that we're dealing with is general aviation. The rare 0.1% is what we're dealing with, the commercial airliners, and the 1% of the time, those are accidents like you saw in Asiana. Before that, we didn't have an accident until the mid-2000s. So it's extremely safe to fly. The accidents I'll be showing here today are the 0.11%. So I don't want anybody to get worried about flying around or anything like that. But meteorology and weather conditions are one of the biggest factors when we're dealing with accidents. About 30% of those accidents you saw from 2007 to 2009 were meteorology related or had weather issues as it pertains to that, and that's pretty much been consistent all the way through this year as well. So next slide there. As far as general aviation accidents, most of the time we're dealing with those, it's adverse wind conditions, so that can be a tailwind, that can be a crosswind on landing, something like that. The next biggest component that we have is low ceilings and visibility conditions, and those lead to fatalities most of the time. You have a pilot that is used to flying around with their little Piper or their little plane, and they're used to flying out on a nice day like today where there's not too many clouds, and then they accidentally go into a cloud from there that leads to some bad experiences sometimes. So next slide. This is the slide that shows the fatality rate for that pie chart there. So when we're talking about adverse winds, those typically don't lead to fatalities. If you're landing with a crosswind or a tailwind, most of the time they'll have just a bump on the gear, or they'll damage the wing a little bit, but everybody survives, everybody's okay, and that's the largest percentage of accidents that we see. Up here you can definitely see the fatality rate for reduced ceilings and visibilities, as well as thunderstorms and mountain obscuration is quite high there. So if you get involved in dealing with an accident that relates to a thunderstorm or a mountain those don't often end too well. So next slide. And click there. So this is a short video here. If you can click the middle of the screen here, it should play this video here. Yeah. So this is an accident from California back in 2006, I believe. Just to show that we do have accidents where wind is an issue here. This plane is taking off. They're taking off with the tailwind, and they're taking off with a crosswind as well. You can see they're not making much altitude. It was a very warm day, and they were also taking off overweight. So they didn't factor into all the weight of the passengers and all the cargo that they were dealing with there. So you can go ahead and click on the next slide there for me. Yeah, so unfortunately it led to 2 fatalities in this case. You can see the runway is pretty long there, and then they also have, it looks quite flat there with the grass and the dirt, but if you click on the next slide, unfortunately there was a boulder right there, and they hit the front of the engine, hit the boulder there, and that's what led to the fatalities in the front seat there. The passengers in the back survived. So even staying up to date on the weather, if you're a general aviation pilot or flying with anybody that has general aviation, is extremely important that they get the most current conditions, whether it's from a windsock or from tuning in on their radio and getting the actual weather. So next slide there. A lot of the accidents that we see as well is they are not getting pre-flight weather. They're looking at weather information, and they're looking at if you go to the next slide, if they're looking at the destination and they're looking at the departure. They'll get the weather reports from those 2 locations, but they forget that weather happens in the middle as well. There could be a line of thunderstorms in there. There could be a lot of cloud cover or icing conditions that folks are dealing with there. Numerous times we've had pilots that will call the night before at 10 p.m. and get a really good weather briefing there, but they're not planning on takeoff till about 7 in the morning. And then they don't get an updated weather forecast before they go out the door. They drive to the airport at 4 and they don't get another weather report, and conditions have changed by then. Some fog is formed at their destination or something like that. So making sure that general aviation pilots get their most updated weather is definitely one of the things that we go out and educate folks on when we go to conferences and talks like this one. So I have 3 examples of some talks today. Try to stick to the southeastern United States here. This was an accident down near the Fayetteville area. It was a IFR flight, or Instrument Flight Rules flight, so he was talking with air traffic control the whole way. He was flying from Somerville up to Fayetteville, and he was dealing with some low ceilings and visibility conditions there. It's hard to see probably at the back. That bottom part there has the surface observations from Fayetteville, and it had overcast ceiling about 500 feet above the deck, and that the winds were not too strong. He declined getting official weather briefing. We did see that he did get the text-based products, but he didn't, when he called up to issue his flight plan, he declined to get the latest weather. So next.
What is all that at the bottom?
So that's the surface observation. Yeah, I'm glad. That's the meteorological airman's report from the out in the middle of an airport. You'll see there's quite a lot of equipment there sometimes, and that's the instruments. They send a laser up to get the ceiling conditions. The OVC 005 is overcast at 500 feet, and they'll get the latest temperature, wind data. All those are reported every hour, and in all the major airports around the country. At little airports, they're reported every 20 minutes. If there's any kind of special weather moving through, thunderstorms, ceiling conditions are going up and down, things like that, it will report those observations. And you can call in on frequency. If you're a pilot, you can tune in on frequency and call in and get that information, as well as call in over the phone. So I could get out my phone right now, I could call the RDU weather station, and it would spit out the information, the latest, what it's seeing over there right now at 1:15 in the afternoon.
And it's on a loop.
It's on a continuous loop, and it loops every about 30 seconds or so. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, what good really does notice do you? Even if you know it's coming, if you're getting from Somerville to Fayetteville, you've got to go through it. And I imagine when you get into it, you become aware of it pretty quickly.
Yes, yes, you do.
I guess I'm just curious, really, what is the benefit to know in an hour in advance as opposed to 60 seconds in advance?
A lot of these folks are going there for just pretty much a joyride, so they could wait till the next day to do the flight. The worst accident I've ever that we've had, and just the saddest thing, is a pilot was taking off, I believe, in Nevada, and he's asking the flight. He's able to only fly in conditions like today, visual flight rules. He's not able to fly through a cloud. He and his wife are there in the office, and they're calling the weather briefer saying, not recommended, not recommended. If I take off to the north is okay. If I take off to the east, I mean, every direction it's bad. Might want to wait till tomorrow. He finds a person in the office there. Hey, can you fly in instrument rated conditions? Can you fly through clouds? Oh yeah, I can do that. Would you mind taking my plane down there and then coming back? And they crashed in a blizzard and snow in the mountains, and they all died. And the reason he wanted to go down there was just to get a paint job done on his plane. You can't wait the next day or schedule a month out or something like that just to do a paint job. The weather conditions and all that, you can wait, especially if it's general aviation. So that's one of the other divisions deals with the 72-hour history. We're going back, we're talking to all the witnesses the day before. How did they feel like before they were taking off? I mean, everything from their cell phone use is a big thing, and their iPad, were they distracted? There was one of the accidents in Colorado, somebody was taking a selfie while they're in the cockpit and crashed and died. So so we look into all the issues there, but most of the time it's get their itis, something like that is dealing with there. So go on the next slide there. So this is just a surface chart. It's kind of hard to see there, but the accidents there near Fayetteville. It's cloudy all across the eastern U.S. You can go to the next click there, Valerie. Here is a surface satellite image, and you can see it's cloudy everywhere. I have one of the stations down there to the south, and I'll explain why I have that up and later. But you can see it's very cloudy. The accident site there's a little southwest of Fayetteville. And next click there, Valerie. So this is the flight track as he's flying around. The black dots are what he was doing there. So he does one missed approach going into Fayetteville. He takes off to the east, and from there his equipment starts having issues, and he's not used to flying in the cloud cover. And so he starts, his gyro gets a little messed up there. So you can see he's very having a lot of difficulty controlling the plane. He comes back around to the southwest. From there, we know he's out of the cloud. He's talking to air traffic control. So he has the plane steady and level and all that. He comes back around, and during that particular point when he's heading south, the air traffic controller says, hey, would you like to go to that other station there you saw on the surface map? It's not cloud free, but the clouds are about 10,000 feet, and you're just going to be flying at 2,000 or 3,000 feet. It'll be great, easy landing there. He seems to say, yes, I want to go, but then turns back and tries to make another approach in the low ceilings and visibilities there in Fayetteville. He flies right through this rain shower. If you do that next click there, I have a 3D view of what that looks like. So the yellow dots are the flight track, and then the green and blue colors are the intensity of the rain shower, and he flies right into that and then banks to the right, and unfortunately has the accident there. So
how much flight experience do you have?
I do not have any, and that is one of my goals, is to be able to get my pilot's license someday as well. But out of the 400 people that work in the agency, about 300 of them do have their pilot's license. A lot of them have their instrument flight rating, and I know at least 10 of them that still, when they're not working in the NTSB, are working for commercial folks and doing their own things there. So go to the next slide there. So this is another accident flying from Northern Virginia down to Florida. He's talking with air traffic control the whole time. He receives an official weather briefing. I mean, he's going, listening to the whole weather briefing, doing a really good job there. The briefer brings up, I would pay attention to the weather as you're flying through South Carolina. The pilot was very concerned about the weather down in Florida. And right in South Carolina is actually where the accident happened. But he said, on the tapes, I'm going to, if I get any bad weather, I'll just land there and we'll wait for it to pass over, and then I'll move on from there. So the closest surface observation had heavy rain and gusts to about 30 to 35 miles an hour at the surface. So you can go to the next slide here. So this is a surface weather chart. On the left side of the screen, there's a frontal boundary. This is the summertime in North Carolina, South Carolina, pretty much like, not today, but close to the weekend, you'll have pop-up showers and thunderstorms. There were some line of thunderstorms moving from west to east through South Carolina. If you go to the next slide. It's a low pressure area on the east coast there. We can move on to the next slide there. Okay, so the satellite chart, very bubbly white clouds there moving from west to east. A nice line of thunderstorms where the accident's at. Next slide. So this has the flight track. The black line is the flight track. The arrows showing he's moving to the southwest. There, the little white dots are all the lightning bolts or strikes around. Within 20 minutes of the accident time, there's about 3,000 to 5,000 And we only capture about 50% of the lightning strikes, so there's probably quite a bit more that's going on. If you go to the next slide here, this is a 3D view flying to the southwest there, and then the red is the most intense part of the thunderstorm as he was flying through. In this particular case, he flew into the thunderstorm. He's talking with air traffic control. He had the weather radar up on his iPad. He told air traffic control that. Air traffic thought that he was looking at different weather, and so there was a lot of confusion. There's a typical example of you have two ball players going for the ball, and no one communicated in this particular case. And so he flew into the thunderstorm, got all messed around in there, and lost his prop. If you click on to the next slide, he was able to come out to the east, fortunately, and just pretty much able to glide down into a field and survived. So we're very fortunate in that case there. So, and we can move on to the last accident here. Have a hot air balloon case over Georgia. It was in the springtime of 2012. He was not paying attention or getting the weather, neither him nor his ground crew. Go on to the next slide. So here's the location there in Georgia, mid-70s, low 80s. Next slide. And he was right in the middle of a warning that was going on at the time when he took off from the hot air balloon. This is a hot air balloon festival in Georgia where they take quite a bit of balloons up, and then the skydivers jump out there and they do a lot of activity. It's a big festival for this town. Everything was going great on the morning, and unfortunately nobody checked the weather for the afternoon. You can go to the next slide. And there were thunderstorms off to the east, and had been there for about an hour and a half to 2 hours or so. And they build back to the west, right over the accident site, right where that balloon goes up there, unfortunately. So if they had looked at the weather radar conditions, they could have seen they were very close to that activity. You can go to the next slide here. This case, they had about 500 to 1,000 lightning strikes within the accident site, 15 to 30 minutes around there as well. And next slide. So this is another video, if you click in the middle there. So this is one of the skydivers right before he gets out of the base of the cloud, right before they get into activity. The pilot there is the one that unfortunately dies in this case. He realizes what's going on. He's going right into the bottom of a thunderstorm. And he tells the guys to get out. The skydivers are completely clueless in this case, because they just think they're out there having a good time. They're going into the base of the cloud right now, and they jump out. And you'll see as he turns back up, you see the last picture of the balloon right there as he goes up into the cloud base of this thunderstorm activity. He's talking to the radio crew the whole time. He goes up to about 16,000 to 20,000 feet or so. When they found the balloon 2 days later in Georgia at 70s to 80s, it was completely filled with hail. So you imagine the melting and all that, and nothing had really melted in 2 days. So you can imagine the amount of hail and all that he was dealing with as he goes up and all the way down. So knowing the weather conditions before you take off is definitely extremely important. So go to the next slide. Communicating the weather, and that's one of the things that we're reaching out to pilot communities and air traffic control quite a bit in this case, and you can do a couple of clicks here. The left click, or the left image, is what a meteorologist would see. It's 256 colors. It's really pretty. They want to be able to see it that way, especially if they're looking for, like your local TV weatherman, if they're looking for tornadoes or anything like that. You want to have the most colors and fidelity possible. The middle image is what you would see if you're pilot flying on your iPad. If you're general aviation, the pilot has 4 colors, and the next image is what air traffic control sees as far as weather radar. They have about 2 to 3 colors. So the importance that we're getting out to the community right now is making sure with all this new technology, it's great to have it, but knowing and making sure that you're communicating with your other folks is extremely important. So, and weather in the cockpit, we're dealing with some time latency issues. If you click to the next slide. Here we have this pilot who thought he was going around the southern part of a thunderstorm complex there. If you click on the next slide, this is where he actually was at that particular time, and if you go to the next image, he flew right into a building rain shower, in this case, there in Texas. So knowing the time latency and reading that manual is extremely important. They say in very small print on there that not to use your iPad and the weather in there for tactical purposes. Use it for strategic. Am I going to take off? I'm not going to take off. And a lot of pilots, they get up there and they think, I have this new G-Whiz thing, which is really great, but then they start using it to fly around thunderstorm activity when there's actually some time lag there. So Go on to the next slide, and then one more click here. So a lot of the products that we issue are safety recommendations. We have no enforcement on that aspect or anything like that, but our recommendations carry a lot of weight, and people do have to answer to them. They have to say, yes, I'm gonna do something, or no, I'm not gonna do something. So that's one of the biggest pushes that we do once our accident fact gathering is done there. So, and with that, I'll stay for any questions.
You mentioned time lag on your iPad. How much time lag?
Anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes most of the time is what they're doing. And the timestamp that you'll see on the bottom is not actually when that weather radar was taken. That's actually when the company, XM Weather, 4Flight, any one of those, is making that image and then uploading it to your pilot or to your iPad or your glass screen there. So it's not actually when that weather radar data was taken. Yes, sir.
With microburst and downburst, with today's equipment, how much leeway or warning would a pilot, commercial pilot, have?
A ton. Every air traffic control tower, especially along the East Coast and now on the West Coast that deals with wind shear and microburst, they have a specialized radar like we do out just a little bit east of Raleigh-Durham International Airport. There's one here. And it uses calculations when thunderstorms and all that are coming through, whether they're going to produce microburst. They're able to give that information to the air traffic controller, who shares that onto the pilot within 15 to 30 seconds. So they're able to route around all that information. So from the accidents that we saw in Texas and Dallas area, and then in Little Rock in 1993, the commercial space has come a long way. So flying, your 737s out of Raleigh or the smaller jets, you're going to have a lot of information there and fidelity to be able to pick up on that. So, yes, sir.
Sounds like from your data that there's a lot big degree of lack of professionalism among non-airline pilots. How much of that is just their decision making? How much of that is equipment?
Yes, the answer to that one. A lot of it is not knowing the equipment, not reading the manual and knowing that information. That's a teachability moment there. A lot of it is decision making, get their itis like I was speaking about earlier, and making sure, a lot of them are not communicating a lot of the time is what they need to do there. But when you're getting your private pilot's license, you can fail every single weather question and still get your license. So there is still that air of making sure that it really comes down to the flight instructor. It's being able to get the pilot's license. When you're getting there, you have a really good instructor. And I know I've spoken to several of the flight schools around here, and they're really good about doing stuff like that. So, but yeah, there's definitely an area of education and a culture there that we're working with the FAA and several other agencies to get out there to the pilot community. So, yes, sir.
Could the pilots have access to the same map or view that the weather service is looking at? You had that one with the weather service with 100 colors, and he only had 4. Why do they use different ones?
Because they're using it for different reasons. The way, on the iPads and all that, they characterize it, they would try to make it as easy for the pilot as possible. If you're looking at 256 colors, a lot of times some people can get distracted by that. There's a lot of information in there that, and there's also a pipeline issue. When you're getting all 256 colors, you're getting a large amount of data, and they don't necessarily have the data stream to be able to upload all those colors and all those maps up into the cockpit for your general aviation folks. There's not a big enough feed at this moment for internet purposes and all that. So, thank you.